Hi there and welcome to the channel, and in this video I'll be talking about Moderato Cantabile by Marguerite Duras, but before I do so, there are a couple of points I should briefly mention. Firstly, this video is the initial installment of a series much like the one I'm producing on Thomas Bernhard, and that is why it's been given its own branding and its very own playlist. Secondly, as I've already provided a comprehensive biographical sketch of Duras in my review of The Lover, a link to which can be found in the description, I won't repeat myself in full here, but will simply note that Duras was born in 1914 in what was then French Indochina and today is Vietnam, that her work is both experimental and highly autobiographical, and that over the course of a long career she produced not only novels but also dramatic works and several screenplays, the most notable example being that of the 1959 film Hiroshima Mon Amour, for which she was nominated for an Academy Award. Okay, we're almost ready to begin, but before we do, I just want to say that for anyone who hasn't read any Duras and is wondering if this novel is a good place to begin, the answer is a resounding yes. This is a short, highly accessible novel, so much so in fact that I read it in the original French and found it perfectly straightforward. Okay, we're ready now to talk about Moderato Cantabile. Duras' seventh novel, Moderato Cantabile, was published in 1958 and was an instant commercial success, selling over 500,000 copies and propelling its author to fame. Though critics treated the novel as an example of the Nouveau Roman, which came to prominence in the 1950s and early 60s, Duras sought to distance herself from this literary movement, insisting that she be viewed as a writer with her own unique style and set of concerns, and it's precisely the singular nature of her writings that I find so fascinating. The action of Moderato Cantabile takes place over a single week, and the central character is Madame Anne Debaret, the wife of the wealthiest inhabitant of an unnamed coastal town, and mother of a young boy, also unnamed, who's been taken against his will for daily piano lessons with the strict Mademoiselle Giraud, whose apartment is located a short walk away in the working class part of town. The novel opens midway through one of these lessons, which have become a contest of wills between the teacher and her student, who today is claiming, to the total disbelief of Mademoiselle Giraud, not to understand the meaning of the phrase Moderato Cantabile, and looks on as the teacher, exploding with rage, insists that the boy state the meaning of the term, which is to play the piece moderately, slowly, and melodiously. When the boy steadfastly refuses to comply, Anne's response is an ambivalent blend of maternal embarrassment and pride in her son's obstinacy, and during this standoff there's a scream from the street below, a woman's scream abruptly cut off, and as a commotion begins outside, the boy suddenly begins an accomplished performance of the piece. Down on the street after the lesson, Anne is informed by an onlooker that a woman has been killed, and she witnesses the scene for herself. Inside a cafe, a distraught man is clinging to the body of his dead lover, kissing her mouth as blood trickles from it, until finally he's dragged away by the police. This brief opening chapter establishes the key themes of the novel: the tension between individual desire and social norms, the scrutiny and censure faced by those who threaten or transgress these norms, particularly in the case of women, and the enigmatic interplay between passion, violence, and madness. The rest of the novel follows a pattern where each chapter presents the events of a single day, with the exception of the penultimate one, which is broken into 3 parts. Each of these days follows a similar routine of Anne walking her son to his music lesson and, once that is done, leaving him to play outside as she enters the cafe where the killing took place. There, under the disapproving eye of the landlady, she drinks large quantities of cheap red wine while engaging in conversation with a young working class man, Chauvin, whom she leaves when the factory siren sounds to indicate the end of the working day. Although these conversations are presented as straight dialogue, they form a mysterious core to the story, as the couple return repeatedly to the same themes: speculation over the killing, and the projecting of themselves onto the lovers, one dead, one driven mad by his deed, the disclosure of vivid fragments of memory that point to their obsession with one another, and finally, comments on the music that Anne's son is playing, but how all of this fits together is never made clear. Each day Anne drinks more and leaves later until the fateful 6th day, when her disgrace is complete, and on the 7th and final day, after one last conversation with Chauvin, she walks into the rays of the dying sun. So that's the story, and now in my analysis I will touch upon 3 points. Firstly, one of the most striking features of Moderato Cantabile, and indeed of The Lover, is the way the text as a whole forms a kind of electrical grid, such that each utterance, each gesture, each image, each detail becomes charged with power. Of course, this is a phenomenon found to some extent in all novels, but in Duras's work it's carried to an extraordinarily high degree, to the point where there's something positively miraculous about her writing, and perhaps the best analogy is suggested by the title of this novel, to music, where the most basic units are capable of being combined and arranged to achieve the most complex and subtle effects. As if to prove this point, Duras uses only the most basic units in Moderato Cantabile: ordinary words, simple syntax, and imagery that unites the human drama with natural rhythms, the course of the sun, the breaking of the waves, the blowing of the wind. One consequence of this is that it's not possible to pick out and read a passage that will demonstrate the quality of this book. There's no wow factor at the level of the sentence or the paragraph. Indeed, anything severed from the whole will be rendered necessarily lifeless. Rather, what this novel does is concentrate power in each word, and I will demonstrate this later in my analysis when I show how, with just 3 simple words, Duras achieves more than many writers would with 100. My second point has been noted by many critics, and that is the ambiguity of this novel, the way it places sole responsibility for interpretation in the hands of the reader, so that while the action is presented with great clarity, there's a palpable absence of context, of precisely those details the narrative prompts us as readers to most desire. So with that in mind, I'll offer my own brief interpretation of this novel, and I'll focus on the role of the murder. Now, what makes this murder so exemplary is that the woman is killed by her lover. What fascinates is the strength with which life must be lived to produce such shocking events that most members of society only encounter on TV or in newspapers or in novels or movies, yet suddenly here is just such an event, shattering everyday reality and pointing to the awesome possibilities that life offers and of how mundane our own existence is in comparison. I think this reading goes some way to accounting for the intensity of Anne and Chauvin's brief relationship, for the way they compulsively act out the parts of the murdered woman and her lover in an attempt to experience the same kind of violent passion. And tragically, the attempt succeeds. Fantasy fuses with reality, as we see in the final exchange between Anne and Chauvin, and Anne at the end of the novel is as dead as the woman lying on the floor of the cafe, not a bloody death, but a social one, cast out of her home and separated from her child. Okay, there's my interpretation. Feel free to leave your own in the comments, and now let's move on to the final point of my analysis. One aspect of this novel that's received surprisingly little attention is its chronotope, although I did find a few French journal articles on the subject. Now, the term chronotope was coined by the literary theorist Mikhail Bakhtin and refers to how a particular space and time are represented and how they influence the themes and narrative structure of a text. As the central character, it is Anne's chronotope, that of a socially prominent married mother, that is dominant and provides the novel with its unity. But what I find so striking is how much her subjective experience resembles that of a prison narrative, a sense of being trapped, of being under constant surveillance, of the deadening nature of routine, and, above all, of a desire to escape. These constraints on Anne's existence extend into every aspect of social life, and so she's constantly aware that she is not free, and that to seize her freedom is in fact a crime. And what makes Moderato Cantabile so rich is the sheer variety of these constraints, large and small, that Duras incorporates, some of which are noted by Anne, some of which are pointed out by others, such as the music teacher and the cafe owner, who take great delight in enforcing social norms, but some of which are so subtle that they pass unremarked. And it's an example from this last class that provides one of my favourite moments of the novel. What I love about this example is it's so simple, just 3 words, yet it demonstrates how the briefest utterance is still penetrated by the norms that govern social life, even when the speaker is a child. The moment in question occurs as evening falls on the 4th day and forms part of a series, one of many in this highly patterned text. On the previous day, Anne had left the cafe moments after the siren sounded, and on the walk home, her son had said, "I'm cold," and placed his hand in hers, causing Anne to be suddenly overwhelmed by her love for him. But on this 4th day, Anne has stayed much longer after the siren has sounded, unwilling to break off her conversation with Chauvin, and the workers are already arriving at the cafe when she leaves, and on the walk home, the boy once again refers to the cold, only this time his tone is one of complaint. "It's cold." It's such a small detail, this shift from "I'm cold" to "it's cold, but it underlines how much of the meaning in Moderato Cantabile resides in its structure, and how each utterance is not merely a response to the moment at which it is spoken, but carries an accumulation of past moments inside itself. This is why the cold of the previous day saw the boy reach for his mother's hand, but today, in outwardly similar circumstances, his sense of having been neglected produces a completely different response. Returning to the idea of the chronotope then, we see in this example how Duras' sensitivity to what the chronotope entails, the interconnectedness of every aspect of the fictional world she constructs, extends into the smallest details of the text, and as the characters navigate and respond to a world of which they are an essential part, they develop and interact in an organic and compelling way without the need for a conventional plot to provoke them into action. So there we have it. This novel was published more than 70 years ago, but reading it I found it just as fresh as it would have been in 1958, a magnificent piece of writing. If you've read The Lover, why not read this? If you've never read any Duras, why not begin? And now, all that remains is for me to bid you farewell. So, until the next time, be safe, be strong, nanu nanu.